Senses. Senses are subjective. This came to mind because I was teaching Magical Worlds this week, and we have a whole segment in this class that talks about this, and I thought, you know, we should talk more about that on the channel. I'm Daniel Whittington. I'm the Chancellor at Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. This is a problem, not a problem. This is a situation that needs to be addressed when you are doing whiskey tastings with other human beings with the goal of creating a moment, creating an event, having a shared experience together. So not just professional whiskey drinkers, but anytime when you're drinking whiskey and you need, you're dealing with the fact that you have to interact with other people around a subjective reality. So first, let's talk about your senses. 4 of your 5 senses have their origin actions effectively in the left brain. And so you get this scenario where you get action followed by awareness, action followed by awareness, or the potential for reaction and sensory data followed by awareness of action sensory data. So you can reach down and touch something and go, hot. And the order that that happened in is very, very close to how it becomes a whole entity in your brain, which is sense, brain, pattern, and then full awareness. What was that? That was heat, that was hot, that was gonna burn me, and then that order. And it's very subjective. I can drink coffee right off of the coffee pot at like 190, you know, 200 degrees when everyone else is like, oh, up. I don't know why, but I always, so what's fine for me, and I don't get the burnt tongue, I don't get the weird fuzzy feeling, it's just, I just sip on it and it feels nice, and then other people in my life will pick it up and be like, oh my God, it's so hot. See, so that sense is very relative. With color, there is a lot of science that shows none of us see the same colors. We don't imagine the same colors. Even when I say, let's look at red, none of us are picturing the same red. Even if I say Coca-Cola red, none of us are picturing the same red. Even if I took a Coke can and held it in front of you, and then I gave you a color palette and said, pick the red that matches this can, I could have 5 people and they're gonna pick 5 different reds out of a really elaborate red color spectrum. Now, does that mean that the fundamental building blocks of senses change? No. Free color spectrum is color spectrum. It doesn't change based on the human. And temperature is temperature. That doesn't change based on the human being. Wavelengths of sound are wavelengths. They don't change frequency spectrums just because you're a woman or a man or because you're older or younger. Frequency spectrum is frequency spectrum. However, once it hits your brain, it becomes a subjective reality instead of an objective reality. And at that point, everything changes. Your loud music might not be my loud music. Your too sweet might not be my too sweet. Your beautiful blue might be that's sort of an off-green gray, right? And so it's very hard to know what someone else's experience of reality is. Very hard to know. You could sort of guess and approximate, but the very specific, high detailed experience of their reality, very different. This even comes down to sight and height. I remember recently I stood up on a stool to be as high as my 16-year-old son, who is 6'3", going on 6'4". I'm 5'9". That's ridiculous. He's a half foot taller than I am. I stood on a 6-inch little platform in our dining room and I looked around and my whole house looked different. And I was like, wait, this is weird. This doesn't look like the same living room. Is this what you see all the time? And he's like, yeah. Like, this is a legitimate perspective change. How do I know? We're not even living in the same reality. Like, when he goes out of the house and he thinks about our home, he's picturing a whole different space than I am. That's insane. Smell is even more so, because smell is the only sense that the sensory receivers go straight to the part of the brain responsible for memory and emotion, the right brain first. And then they wrap into the left brain to achieve wholeness and awareness of an experience. So you can smell something and think Christmas before you can be aware of what is that smell and what's causing that smell. If you've had a boyfriend or a girlfriend with really specific cologne or perfume or shampoo, you can walk into a room, especially if they're an ex, you can walk into a room and smell that smell, and a part of your brain goes, where are they? Until you realize, wait, this is my own home. There's no way they're here. Or wait, this is a whole different country. There's no way they're here. That's how that works, right? So, in a world where everything is subjective and you can't possibly know another person's reality, how the hell do you have a shared experience over a bottle of whiskey and smells and tastes? I'll tell you. But first, let's do Tomatin 12. Tomatin is, I think, one of the most underrated scotches. I love Tomatin. Not very few people, except for real Scotch whiskey drinkers, know about Tomatin. They're getting more and more distribution out there, so this is changing, but they're definitely not anywhere near a household name. But I think they are a beautiful example of a really great Highland Speyside Scotch. This is sherry and bourbon mix, which is the case with so many. I mean, that's Balvenie Doublewood. This is so, although they're doing cast finishing, but this is both barrels, you know, you get both, everything you get from a sherry cask, but this 12 right here that I'm smelling is way more accenting the bourbon cask than the sherry cask. Although it does have those sort of sweet, darker, like hinting at fruits, everything is a lot more lighter vanilla and pear peach kind of fruity. It does feel earthy, like floral plants, but like actual plants. The nose is beautiful. It's creamy, it's density, but it's not cloying or overwhelming. Okay, so the palate, softer than I want it to be. The nose is just rich. And I almost said the word voluptuous, so I'm just going to say it. It's just envelops. It's just, whoa, it's beautiful. And then, but in a bourbon direction, light, not a dark cherry fruit heaviness. But the palate is a little bit lighter. The palate is not thin. No, it's thin. It's thin compared to the nose. Hang on. There we go. I think there's just a subtlety there that I was prepared for a more in-your-face richness on the palate because the nose is sort of in-your-face density, but the palate sort of like holds back a little and it's lighter and it kind of leans back and you've got to lean in to interact with it. The palate is actually a little more barley and earth forward than all of the fruit notes, and it is creamy and it's oily, but it's soft. That's a really interesting one. These guys are about 20 minutes south of Inverness on the east side of Inverness, of Loch Ness. They're like right on the edge, Highland Speyside, like right on the edge. Man, it makes me regret that when I lived in Scotland for just a small window, it was before I was drinking. And now I regret that. Because I go look at where I was, which was Banff and Macduff, which is dead middle Speyside, right on the North Sea edge. And it's surrounded by so many of my favorite distilleries, and I had no idea. I was just a 18, 19-year-old kid. What could have been? Oh, man. Probably good I didn't know about that. Anyway. All right, so how do you have a shared experience with people? Here's the answer. Although I cannot be sure that we're experiencing the exact same thing in the same way, there are shared experiences that I can be relatively sure you have experienced. And so, for example, this is an older joke, but if I can't be sure that we see the same red, but if I brought you up a picture from a TV sitcom of space travel and interplanetary journeys, and I said, one of these men is about to die, we could all pick out the guy wearing the red shirt. Now, we're probably not all seeing the same red, and we wouldn't be able to replicate the same red, but in a green and blue and red combo, you're gonna find the red shirt, right? Unless you're colorblind, and there's some other things like that. So while I might think that something is too salty or too sweet, we can at least agree on what sweet things taste like. I might like this kind of ice cream, and you might like that kind of ice cream, and I might like sherbet instead of ice cream, but we can all reference ice cream as a category and have sort of a general idea what we're talking about. There used to be an era where I would describe certain things as this almost coconut curry, and that didn't always land wherever I was in the US, because sometimes I was in towns, small towns, where there was no Asian food of any kind whatsoever, and referencing a curry when you've never had curry, there's just no callback for people. But you get into big cities and everyone's got some sort of a reference for curry powder, right? And so the trick when you're doing tasting experiences with people is pick up your glass and have your own autobiographical moment. But then step back and try to figure out what part of your story and your experience is most likely to be a potentially shared experience with this space. And you have to read it from the room, and you have to read it from the town, and you have to read it from the whiskeys you're drinking and the people. But shared story, shared experience, that's how you do a tasting with a group, is you look for common ground in shared story and shared experience instead of trying to explain your own autobiographical journey of a spirit. I hope that's helpful. I'm really glad you're here. All right. Like and subscribe.